I think an event of this kind is a stepping stone for the young scientists who, when they come here, get some recognition for what they are doing and also are able to form networks.
Falling Walls Lab is unique because we have 75 young people presenting their idea. Falling Walls is about the most pressing challenges of our time, creating innovative solutions.
I want to make science accessible to every single person in this world because the science is there to help humanity, and humanity must understand what it is that we're researching.
Participation for me means understanding my own work better, gaining the skills to present in these sorts of high-profile environments with the best equipment and the best people in the world.
The opportunities the Falling Walls gave to us to really put the ideas out and really make a change in the world really appealed to me, and that's how I reached there.
To me, it's really the breadth of ideas, the breadth across the scientific disciplines. We've faced very large challenges, and Falling Walls is a place full of hope on so many levels.
Good afternoon. Please allow me to welcome you all to the Falling Walls Lab Sydney, an exciting event of new science ideas for a better future. Falling Walls Lab brings together young scientists, engineers, professionals from across the globe to present their vision on how to make the world an even better place. I'm Hans Bachor, Professor Emeritus at the Australian National University, and I will be your MC this afternoon. This event, one of about 71 happening around the globe, will showcase and select the best presentation ideas submitted from New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania, and the ACT. 10 researchers have been selected to share their outstanding work. And each presenter has just 3 minutes to make their case, to explain the wall they wish to break down, and how this can be done. We are most grateful to have the panel of renowned judges who will select the winners of today's competition. And the jury members are Professor Hugh Duran-White, Jury Chair, New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, Commissioner, Natural Resources Commission, New South Wales Government. Professor Martina Stenzel, ARC Laureate Fellow and Professor from the University of New South Wales. Professor Stephen Simpson, Academic Director, Charles Perkins, Sydney University. Ms. Rosie Keane, Consul General, Embassy of Ireland, Australia. Dr. Michael Zetinik, Deputy Executive Director, German-Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Professor Catherine Beloff, Pro-Vice-Chancellor Global Engagement at the University of Sydney. Mr. Nishant Shandilya, Regional Coordinator Euraccess, Australia and New Zealand. And Mrs. Katharina McGrath, Director, Derda Day Information Centre in Sydney. Now, please let me introduce the presenters we have today. We have Breaking the Wall of Ageless Electronics, Hareem Khan from CSIRO. Breaking the Wall of Medical Device Bioactivity, Oliver Lotz from the University of Sydney. Breaking the Wall of Drug-Resistant Malaria, Merryn Fraser from the Australian National University. Breaking the Wall of Self-Compassion, Madeleine Ferrari from the Australian Catholic University. Breaking the Wall of Deep Geothermal Energy Recoveries, Fiona, Harshini, Roy, Desmond, Godfrey from Monash University. Breaking the Wall of Conceptual Shift in Prevention of T2D, Shamoon from the Australian National University. Breaking the Wall of Space Debris Prevention, Mars Butfield Edison from the University of Tasmania. Breaking the Wall of Mobility as a Service Design, Hernando Lozano Paredes from the University of Technology, Sydney. Breaking the Wall of False Promises in Supply Chain, Hang Bui from the University of New South Wales. And Breaking the Wall of Hidden Carbon Emissions in Agriculture, Martino Malerba from Deakin University. What a wide range of ideas, of walls, of improvements we could make. We will now proceed to start the presentations. Each presenter will have 3 minutes to pitch their project, followed by questions or comments from the jury to the presenter. Our first, second, and third place winners will be decided by the jury and announced at the end of the event today. And there will also be a People's Choice winner today. You, our live stream audience, please vote for this winner. Following the 10 presentation, the voting will open. The link to vote will be in the comments section of your live stream on YouTube, Facebook. We also encourage everyone to engage today, either by Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And our Twitter hashtag for today is #FWSYD, and you can tag at falling_walls, Euraccess_Oz and that, at deadade_Australia, and at science_academy. Now, we're all ready. Let's welcome our first presenter, Hareem from CSIRO.
At some point in our lives, we've all tried at least once to salvage wet electronics by shoving it into a bag of rice and then praying really, really hard to the circuit gods to save our device. The image on the slide may or may not be of an actual incident. Whether this method actually works is debatable, but on the other hand, there must be some sort of logic for doing this, right? So basically, we know that water is not good for the electronic circuits that are inside of our laptop or mobile phones. So by putting it in the rice, we're attempting to dry it out by drawing all the water out. While obviously we don't go dunking our electronics into a bucket of water if we can avoid it, unless you're a YouTube influencer, but even then, realistically, moisture still exists in our ambient environment. With this moisture and oxygen from our surrounding air, we have what we call redox reactions. These reactions become a major contributor to the slow degradation of our devices, and that eventually causes them to fail, limiting their lifetime. One of the ways we currently use to protect our devices is to encapsulate them or cover them with a barrier layer. The actual structure that is used is very dependent on the type of device that you're trying to cover or apply to, but a majority of these are usually made up of polymers, which are inherently not the best barriers because they have pores in them. And the basic strategy that's being used over here is just to slow down the water, the oxygen, getting to the other side of the barrier. So, what if we incorporate functional materials into this barrier system to act selectively as water and oxygen getters? This will sequester the contaminants, and so we can effectively stop them in their paths. We propose using metal organic frameworks, or MOFs. MOFs are an interesting class of materials with many useful properties like large uptake capacity, chemical tunability, and selectivity. And so we can use them like little chemical sponges. If we choose MOFs selective to moisture and oxygen, we can prevent these molecules from traversing the polymer barrier. And one of the ways that we know that our barrier is effective is by measuring the amount of oxygen and water that gets across the barrier in a given period of time, using parameters like water vapor transmission rate and oxygen transmission rate, WVTR or OTR. If we reduce these two parameters, we can effectively reduce the rate of degradation and consequentially increase the lifetime of our devices to be potentially ageless.
I think, well done. It's a fantastic idea. I've often lost my electronics in lots of different ways. Is it expensive? Does it degrade with time? What's the limiting factor at the moment?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I would say one of the things that you need to do is carefully calculate how much of a MOF loading you need in your structure, because that's how long it's going to take to how much of the moisture it can uptake or the oxygen it can uptake. But the reason we're calling it ageless is because it's relatively more ageless compared to the degradation that would happen within the device itself. So rather than having ambient or external factors that would cause a degradation, as long as it's operating to its maximum lifetime, then that would be considered ageless.
So would you actually be able to, just out of interest, put this in water when you're finished?
No, that would be like a worst case scenario. So we're actually just aiming more for like just the ambient moisture and oxygen. So if we were applying it to, let's say, for example, photovoltaic devices, so being able to keep our solar cells out in the climate for at least 30 years plus. So yeah, those are the kind of applications we're looking at.
Okay, it's a great idea, Hareem. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you, Hareem, for the talk and the presentation. Now you see the pattern which we will follow throughout this competition. So let's please welcome our second presenter, Oliver Lotz from the University of Sydney.
And then in one hand, I'm holding a beating human heart. Any volunteers? And in the other, I'm holding an artificial replica made of mostly plastic. If I were to ask you which is more likely to work inside a patient, then all of you would probably vote for the real heart. The question is why? This is an important question because the waiting lists for organ transplants can take years, if you survive that long, and the number of organ replacements needed is likely to dramatically increase in the near future thanks to an aging population. This issue is really one of bioactivity. Can we communicate with cells in the ways that they understand? Medical devices are good and getting better at showing relevant architecture, stiffness, and roughness, physical cues, but we're still missing the biomolecules. Cells see a world not just full of biomolecules, but made of them. They help cells to grow, live, and transform. If we could control bioactivity, then it's game on for a range of new healthcare devices and treatments. For example, stem cell therapies need incubators that make cells want to grow. Organ models need to be realistic enough to be relevant for drug testing, and medical implants need a guarantee that they won't get rejected. Current methods to introduce bioactivity typically use chemicals. These methods risk toxicity for patients, are slow, and can't even pattern. When they don't use chemicals, the bonds are typically too weak to keep the biomolecules where they need to be. My research is about building a tool that can do it all. Quick, targeted surface treatments to introduce bioactivity, no chemicals needed. I use plasma in open air, not blood plasma, physics plasma, the fourth state of matter. This tool is like a torch or a pen and can be an extra head in a bioprinter. No other lab is using this approach. This is an important step to creating realistic tissue for patients. The scaffolds that I've modified with my plasma pen help cells grow more easily. So if that were an organ, then the patient's body would be a lot happier to have it. My collaborators and I are showing that this works on real applications. For example, growing cartilage for knee replacements. Knees are not very good at repairing themselves, so a bioprinting solution would be a big boost in quality of life for many patients. The results to date are already better than the current gold standard. Next up, it's time to get this technology to market with the world-class bioprinting company that I'm partnered with. To summarize, I'm developing this plasma pen tool for bioprinters so that when you get sick and your body needs one of these two, it can't tell the difference.
Thank you, Oliver. That was fascinating, and well done on your presentation. So I guess my question is, it's very impressive, but I suppose it's a very competitive market, and I wonder why aren't other labs using this approach already?
Thanks, Rosie. So basically, it's a limit of understanding in that at the moment, most of the literature is focused on basically applying chemistry approaches to more complicated scenarios, whereas my group comes from a plasma physics background that's achieved similar things at lower pressure. So we're able to translate some of those lessons and understandings to the atmospheric pressure range, which allows it to be used for bioprinting. So I think a lot of others will catch on soon, but for the moment at least, we're the only ones.
And in terms, I note that you have one partner already, but what other stakeholders or partners could help you, I suppose, realize this concept?
Yeah, so we've got the bioprinting company already. That's definitely quite helpful in terms of the translation. The main other stakeholder that I think would be useful is that we're currently in talks with a plasma pen company, so they make them and sell them for other applications. So if they could design one according to our specs, then that would make the like commercialization much quicker. So they'd already be able to combine the devices with the printers and then be out to research labs and hospitals much sooner. Beyond that, just organizations, so medical healthcare bodies and other research labs and things. Basically, the more the merrier. At the moment, it's about getting the information out there that this is possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosie and Oliver. Now, please welcome our third presenter, Merryn Fraser from the Australian National University.
Of the Trojan War was set 3,000 years ago, an epic tale of a decade-long struggle, ending with the Greeks sailing away, seemingly defeated, leaving behind a wooden horse. But the Trojan victory was short-lived as they pulled their trophy in through the city walls, unaware that their enemies lay hidden inside. I'm no historian, but I'm working on a much older war where the Trojan horse may again prove useful. I'm talking about the struggle between humans and malaria parasites, a war that has raged on for the entirety of human history. These tiny parasites have killed billions of humans, though with significant medical advancements, we seem to be coming out on top. But in recent years, our human death toll has risen, in part because our best weapons, our frontline treatments, are less effective than they used to be, since the parasites have evolved drug resistance to overcome our advances. We need new ways to target them, and so I'm looking back to ancient Greek legends for some fresh ideas. First, we need to understand our enemies and identify their weak spots. Well, malaria parasites love cholesterol, so they steal it from our blood. We could try and stop this thievery, or take some Trojan inspiration. So we hid a drug in with the cholesterol, hoping it would sneak in under the guise of a tasty treat. Using this strategy, I fooled the parasites who took the poisoned food inside. This meant that the disguised drug was much better at killing the parasites than the normal drug. And this strategy worked against multiple branches of the parasite's army: the spies in the liver, the soldiers in the blood, the scouts ready to attack a new victim, and even those smart resistant parasites which had already evolved ways to avoid the normal drug. They were all tricked when we hid it in the horse. But these parasites live in our body, so we don't want collateral damage. I'm pleased that our human cells were much smarter than the parasites and left the horse outside. The compound was far less toxic to our cells. So we're breaking down the wall of drug-resistant malaria and reducing the impact on our own side, all under the guise of a friendly wooden horse slipping in through the city walls.
Hi, Merryn. This was really fascinating. And of course, malaria is a very important topic, and you have here a very clever solution. So your drug, is it going to be for oral administration, or do we still have to go through a needle? What is your vision here?
I mean, our vision overall is that we would love to get an oral formulation. At the moment, we're still kind of just starting the work where we actually put it into a body and see what kind of happens when it gets to interact with a functioning immune system and such, so moving beyond the lab. And so we're still kind of working on which formulation is the best way to do that, so that it can be orally absorbed for optimal administration. But the IV administration is doing for now.
And you also said that the cells in our body would not take up this formulation. Is that right? But we use cholesterol in our body too. So how does our body know not to use this type of cholesterol?
Good question. So it seems to be that because this cholesterol is being delivered in a different format. So usually cholesterol would be delivered to human cells in the format of lipoproteins, so big proteins, as well as all the kind of nice fats and oils like cholesterol is. And that seems to be the main way that normal human cells get cholesterol. Whereas because our molecule doesn't, we haven't formulated it in that way, it seems that maybe that's why it doesn't go into the mammalian cells, but it does go into the parasites because they can take up cholesterol in different ways. But we are still investigating what is behind this difference in selectivity. It could also just be because the parasites love cholesterol so much that they're sucking it all in before the human cells get a chance.
That's really fascinating. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Martina and Merryn. Now, please welcome our fourth presenter, Madeleine Ferrari from the Australian Catholic University.
I'm Madeleine Ferrari from Australian Catholic University, and I'm breaking the wall on self-compassion. Here is my beautiful 2-year-old. Now, he's holding my keys, and about 30 seconds after this photograph was taken, the lift doors behind him opened, and he dropped the keys, and they almost fell in between the gap in the lift. Now, even though nothing truly terrible happened, in that moment, I felt my self-criticism go into hyperdrive. I went, oh my God, why did I give a toddler my keys? I'm an idiot. Why did I do this? This was a terrible decision. But I know for a fact that if it was a good friend who was in that position instead of me, a good friend who I wanted to see do well, who I loved, who I wanted to support, I would never say those things. Instead, I'd make a joke, I'd put it in perspective, or I'd say, look, even if you made a bad call, I still think you're a wonderful mum or a wonderful person. So self-compassion is channeling some of that compassionate wisdom that we readily extend to others, also to ourselves. And some colleagues and I have put together a few papers that are starting to break the wall on self-compassion. So firstly, self-compassion seems to weaken the link between perfectionism and depression. Secondly, self-compassion seems to help populations with chronic illnesses like diabetes, both in their medical outcomes and also in their psychological well-being. Thirdly, self-compassion seems to relate to better emotion regulation, which underpins most forms of mental illness. Fourthly, high levels of self-compassion generally map onto healthy psychological outcomes for adolescents, including low anxiety, low perfectionism, low depression, low rumination, low fusion with unhelpful thoughts. Fifthly, and really excitingly, our meta-analysis showed that self-compassion interventions are able to increase self-compassion. So even if you're low on self-compassion, that can change. But our sixth study raises the point that those 5 studies are mostly based on group averages, as is most self-compassion research. And our next research question is asking, how does self-compassion differ for all of us from individual to individual? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeline. That was a fascinating talk and really interesting. I think particularly timely following the pandemic, where I think all of us have been pretty tough on ourselves. And I guess I'm wondering about our capacity for self-compassion, our capacity to be self-aware enough to know when we're being too hard on ourselves, as you mentioned with your son. And I guess that comes down to, how do you actually measure it if we're not aware ourselves of our own levels of compassion? How do you go about measuring compassion? You're still on mute, Madeline, I think. Audio settings. And I can tell you've got a fantastic answer for me too.
Testing.
Yes, we've got you. Wonderful. No, we've lost you again. What did you do for that second? Settings at the bottom. Afraid not.
Testing.
Yep, okay, now we can hear you.
Excellent. And my self-criticism about not having the function on this computer is flaring up right now. Look, beautiful question. If I can cut to the chase, that meta-analysis that found that self-compassion focused psychological clinical interventions can actually cultivate self-compassion, even if someone perhaps naturally tends to be very self-critical, or even, as you mentioned, they're not even quite aware of how they relate to themselves. And it's so intuitive, right? Like often it's so automatic that we don't even realize how we relate to ourselves. We just take it as a truth. Like I am an idiot or I am an okay person. We're not even aware of it. But that meta-analysis was exciting because there are existing psychological interventions that can cultivate those skills of emotional awareness, emotional understanding, and also being courageous enough to create a little bit of space around how we're reacting in those painful moments, and maybe gently shifting the dialogue. So that meta-analysis is saying, but like with most things in psychology, we can keep working on those interventions, refining them, making them stronger, making them work not just when we're feeling calm, but also in those times of stress when we really need them.
Fantastic. I look forward to seeing what you achieve when you start looking at individual self-compassion.
Well, thanks for bearing with me there, Kathy.
Pleasure. Well done, Madeline.
Madeleine. Now, please welcome our fifth presenter, Fiona, Harshini, Roy, Desmond, Godfrey from Monash University.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Fiona from Monash University. My topic is Decarbonize the Planet. The global energy demand is increasing with population growth. The global energy generation is mostly rely on oil, gas and coal, which contributes more than 75% of global energy demand. So the burning of oil, gas and coal can increase the CO2 level in the atmosphere. So now we have to act on climate change for our future generation. To become fossil-free, reduce CO2 emission and reverse the climate change, we need a more sustainable and renewable energy resource, which must be continually produced regardless of sun or wind. So we have one just beneath our feet. So that is geothermal clean power. Even just 1% of geothermal energy is enough to supply about 25,000 years of energy demand of the world. We can extract geothermal energy by using enhanced geothermal system if we are injecting cold water through a well to extract the heat from hot rock body. Industry are using water for the fracking. hydrofracking as bad public perception. Even some places ban this technology as well, including Victoria. Then why we are using water? What are the problems associated with water? For a single fracturing, million gallons of water is needed, which induce seismic activity as well. Many chemicals are used. Australia is the driest country. We have to save the water. Then, is there any alternative to water? Absolutely yes. We can use carbon dioxide. Our preliminary studies shows that carbon dioxide is superior to water because the production is 10 times higher than that of water. No seismic activity, geological storage of CO2. So we can reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere, which contributing to net zero emission target. Finally, we have sustainable and renewable energy resource. By using this technology, we can power the world, including African countries. By using this technology, they can plant, reduce the hunger. So finally, this is a good technology. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Fiona. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. CO2, SCCO2 is supercritical carbon dioxide, isn't it? So how do you produce supercritical carbon dioxide?
So normally when the temperature is above 31 Celsius and the pressure is above 7 megapascal, the carbon dioxide is converted into supercritical stage. Yes. So in our laboratory, we have facility to increase the pressure as well as increase the temperature. For that environment, the carbon dioxide is act as the supercritical carbon dioxide.
So they're quite achievable temperatures and pressures, aren't they? So you're producing it, pumping it down, and then recovering it with the heat stored. Is there any storage of the carbon dioxide in that process, or does it go down and come back up again fully recovered?
So normally there are some minor cracks. So in the minor cracks, some carbon dioxide can be stored. So probably we can recover the most of carbon dioxide.
Excellent. So what you're doing essentially then is saving water. Is that's you think the principal advantage is you're not having to add chemicals to the water as well?
In the carbon dioxide fracturing, we are using a little amount of water, so we are reducing the water requirement. The main problem is with the use of water fracturing, seismic activities can be induced. By using carbon dioxide, we can reduce that activity, so we can get good public attention.
And avoid earthquakes. Very good, excellent plan. Well, thank you very, very much. That was tremendous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Fiona. Now, please welcome our sixth presenter, Muhammad Shamoon from the Australian National University.
Getting out of one pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, but sadly not from all. Diabetes pandemic is impacting 540 million people and is estimated to impact 780 million people in next 2 decades with $1,000 billion associated health cost. More importantly, the rise in cases continues to be upward. Well, you might be aware of the fact that hyperglycemia developed on the background of primary insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. Let me introduce to a less debated culprit, the primary hyperinsulinemia. In this scenario, the overstimulation of islet beta cell in nutrient-rich hostile environment causes the hyperinsulinemia, which drives the downstream events such as obesity, insulin resistance, islet beta cell failure, and finally, the development of type 2 diabetes. The theory behind hyperinsulinemia is islet beta cells are able to sense mixed nutrient and amino acids amplify the glucose-stimulated insulin secretion. Well, this is significant in search of new therapeutic target to curtail hyperinsulinemia to treat type 2 diabetes. I'm focusing on reducing the amino acid in the blood via knockout of broad neutral amino acid transporter SLC6A19 in mice, which is expressed in small intestine and kidney and enable the absorption and reabsorption of amino acid in the blood. By taking this new approach, I have been successful to make a strong crack in the wall of type 2 diabetes pandemic, such that the deficiency in knockout mice resulted 90% type 2 diabetes free survival compared with less than 40% in wild type. Well, brain struggle to accept that someone might propose to treat type 2 diabetes by reducing the insulin secretion, but we have to reach the foundation of the wall to break it completely by taking an unusual path which has been there but not explored well. I'm hopeful that we are not far away from having new therapeutic target to treat type 2 diabetes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohamed, for your very interesting pitch. And I have a family history of type 2 diabetes myself. So I'm very, very interested in your research and what this can also mean in preventing and possibly helping to cure type 2 diabetes. My question for you is, which next step in your research would you need to take to explore how the results that you've seen in mice translate to the human body, and are there indicators on how likely a correlation of the results is?
Thank you so much. Very great question. The first thing in my next step is to take the finding to the beta cells, to isolate the beta cell and see the finding in vitro. And then based on these results, because this amino acid transporter that we are targeting, the mutation in this transporter is physiologically healthy. It's called the Hartnup disorder. So that means person having Hartnup disorder live physiologically healthy life. So if we got the finding that islet beta cells are overstimulated in vitro, then proposing those clinical trial studies we will have a much stronger correlation, and with the strong background that targeting this amino acid transporter is relatively safe. So that are my plan for the next steps in this project.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and good luck along the way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katarina, and thank you, Mohamed. Now, please welcome our seventh presenter, Mars Butfield Edison from the University of Tasmania.
I'm Mars Butfield Edison. I'm a computer scientist working on preventing space debris. Space debris is largely unmanaged. Our methods for active, on-orbit debris removal are underdeveloped, and our preventative legislation is easy to dodge. So the risk faced by our critical space-based infrastructure only grows by the day. Nowadays, our primary method of mitigation is a global collaborative effort called space traffic management. Like air traffic control does for aviation, space traffic management seeks to constantly monitor all of the objects in near-Earth space and see where they're going. That way we can put up an early warning if we think two objects are going to collide. But while satellites have gotten cheaper and easier to get into space, our space tracking capacity has fallen behind. We cannot afford multiple years and millions or billions of dollars building each new space tracking radar, especially when in the next few years we're going to need dozens of them. So what do we already have? Well, radio sensors built for deep space astronomy or atmospheric studies have similar hardware capabilities than a radar receiver, and we already have dozens of them or more all around the world. Unfortunately, radio telescopes made for astronomical observations suffer some issues the same as humans do. A human with two eyes, looking at something at a distance, can get a sense of depth because their brain knows how to reconcile the two different perspectives into one image. For a telescope made to look at things in deep space, something only a few hundred kilometers up is too close, and like a human looking at the end of their own nose, It goes out of focus. The way that it knows how to reconcile those perspectives breaks down when those two perspectives become too dissimilar. And we end up with a smearing effect in our Doppler readings that makes any of our location detections have enormous error margins. So instead, we need to change something about their brains. That's where I come in. I'm writing experimental GPU-based software that can run in real time in the back end of large radio telescope arrays that produce gigabytes of data every few minutes. They'll perform some of the traditional transformations that we need to get useful information out of telescope data, like accounting for Earth's rotation during observation, or for radio signals that fall outside of the beam center of the telescope. But then we need to integrate novel, new algorithms that account for that Doppler smearing in the near fields and for the angular difference seen by these different telescopes. And if we can do this in real time, our astronomical radio telescopes should be competitive to a dedicated space radar in performance of tracking space debris, saving us billions of dollars in tackling this crisis.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mars, for that interesting presentation. You are tackling a very unique topic here. I'm sure you are aware that the UN's Office for Outer Space Affairs also has formulated space debris guidelines, right? So in that regard, how do you think your measure, the measure that you are proposing, is going to address it? Is it going to address the near term or over the longer term issues?
So we kind of have three ways to tackle space debris, and one of them is retroactive, so it's the going up and actively removing junk from orbit, and we have the early preventative, which is some of the stuff that the UN is working on, which is when they team up with legislative bodies in different countries to try to deny licenses to launch providers who want to put something in space that is too likely to turn into debris or is unmanaged, which we're starting to see in the US. There have been some people who have been denied licenses to put their things into orbit because they were too small or too hard to track. And this is kind of the in-between, where we have some things that are already up there, we can't prevent them from getting up there, or we have things that we need to put in space anyway to provide critical services like remote connectivity. But we're not yet up to a point where we can remove things from orbit en masse. So we need this thing in between, which is like that air traffic control, that management of things that are up there. And even once we remove all of the junk, ideally, from orbit one day, we will still need a way to manage that even the active satellites don't hit each other, which is where this fills that gap. Either way, even if we solve the space debris crisis, we still need better tracking infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nishant. Thank you, Mars. Now, please welcome our 8th presenter, Luis Hernando Lozano Paredes from the University of Technology, Sydney.
Hello, everyone. I want to give many thanks to Falling Walls Lab Sydney. My name is Luis Hernando Lozano Paredes, and I want to break the walls of mobility as a service. Over the last 30 years, information and communication technologies, and most recently understood platform technologies, have deeply penetrated mobility development in cities. Mobility as a service is an emerging vision based on the integration and management of many transportation services to provide a joint digital channel that enables users, the demand side, to plan, book, and pay for multiple modes of transportation. However, the idea of mobility as a service implementation, I think, dangerously flirts with the same mistaken view that argues that infrastructure building and spending, the shinier and fancier it can be, can solve city issues on its own. Mobility as a service, as it stands now, requires the almost seamless functioning of transportation systems and the connection of algorithms to provide a coherent and efficient service. However, this is hardly the case in any city, that transportation systems are completely 100% there. Mobility as a service implementation does not give the space, again, as it stands today, to the characteristics of daily uses and provision of transportation services and how particularly drivers are providing them. There are examples in San Francisco and Bogota, the images that you can see in the slides, where drivers adapt to their work to the digital options that they have. And even if it's not the base design framework, I mean, it's very difficult to deal with all these screens, it is what they do, particularly in the case of the ride-hailing platforms that will, without doubt, have to be included in an overall mobility as a service development. Leaving here the question of what mobility as a service implementation policies should look at and from where it should harness the knowledge, mainly practice knowledge, to develop a service that genuinely engages with that word, service. The answer, for me, in this case, is the potential for harnessing the social innovation embedded in the different ways of using platforms. Mobility as a service should include, beyond all its articulation and algorithms and intentless, seamless operation with transportation systems, the opening for a co-design process that acknowledges the hybrid nature of technology uses and understand that people engage and use with mobility and mobility technologies in their own way, especially if they are providing the service. In this case, the expert design of mobility as a service implementation should harness the confirmation of a design coalition from and with the drivers. Thank you.
Hey, Louise. This is a little bit of my background because I used to do autonomous vehicles, right? So I just try to understand what exactly, I mean, one of the big things with people like Uber and all these other services is the business model that allows them to, at least in theory, make money. How do you actually integrate all that? How do you make it like open source, getting everybody together, making it user-focused rather than company-focused? There's a real cultural shift that needs to happen, surely.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's a need for, as you say, it's a cultural shift, but also the incorporation of maybe cooperative or mutualistic ways into understanding platform economies. So that will be, as a business model, it will be a change or a shift towards these ideas of platform cooperativism that are promoted by Scholz and Schneider and all of that. But even before that is literally observing what's happening on the ground and what are people are organizing, how are people organizing to maybe harness from that what is the business model. Because at the end of the day, if we ask the question of the business model before looking what's happening, then we're making the same mistake again. Maybe we'll have to go again and harness and observe what are these, like, if you were vernacular ways of working, and then from that build the business model or build the alternative structures that we can provide for this new mobility as a service.
So what about even, just the use of more publicly available modes of transport? How do we get around this whole issue of like optimizing a network regardless of the platform, optimizing it for people?
I think at the end of the day, you need to be more qualitative in that sense. And before any type of intervention on a public way, even in the greater public systems, you need to have this first, if you want a digital ethnography or ethnography, what people or how people are using. Because one of the problems with public transportation and with the big centralized systems is that they end up destroying the more community-based and more capillary ways of transportation. That's what has happened in many cities in the global south, and even here in Australia. In Sydney, we have areas in Western Sydney that are super inaccessible. So it's a way of how do we ask the questions at the end of the day. And it's a methodological approach.
I have another problem as well. I don't have a smartphone. Thank you very much, Liz. Good idea.
Thank you, Hugh and Louis. Now, please welcome our 9th presenter, Hung Bui from the University of New South Wales.
All heard about blockchain, and it provides a high level of trustworthy, transparent, and privacy. How that is work? Let's figure it out together. Let's suppose that I have action now and said I have done it. I have proof of receipt, certificate, or license to prove my word. Blockchain will use the proof to verify the authenticity of my action. Then it helps me to record this transaction in the block. Once recorded, it cannot modify or delete it, so that it's trustworthy, transparent, and high level of privacy. It looks all good, right? But now what will happen if we don't have proof when you claim? For example, I promise I will do it later in the future. In such cases, blockchain will not work. You may ask, is this promise important? Yes, it is. Let's take another example of supply chain contract, which is say it now and do it later here. In Australia, supply chain plays essential part in daily operations in service sector, and the service sector contributes 78% of Australia's GDP. Currently, blockchain is applied in supply chain with basic activities, but not for complex activities, where false promises present with fraudulent behavior. Because of this, there is an annual 3 billion of fraud in supply chain. If we can address this fraud, we will be able to increase the supply chain contribution to Australia's GDP. My research aims to propose a framework to address the fraud promise and prevent the fraud with blockchain. How do I do that? On my blockchain model, a company has a record of its immutable trustworthiness. It records every promise that the company made. If it was false, it resulted in a low score and negative feedback from its partner. Other partners can access this record to see how stable your trustworthiness and your effort to keep your word, so that the trustworthiness of a promise can be measured, accountable, transparent, motivate company keep their word on every promise to avoid false promise to be recorded. I named the new framework as CEF as the first decentralized application to help companies in supply chain to break the wall of recording a promise on blockchain by flick the switch to integrity.
Hello, Hank, and congratulations on this excellent idea and presentations. Thank you very much for that. I have a question. You point out that your blockchain solution also provides high privacy in its application. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit further how that is ensured?
Thank Michael for this question. Is really good point. My solution is blockchain that have the two level of permission, public and also private one. So in the when the company giving the feedback in details how trustworthy the partner to keep the promise is gonna be recorded in the private blockchain that is only the ranking partner can see the details. And as you can see in the final slide, that I have an open dashboard that every partner can see that it's transparent. So people can see the general score and also about the over times how they effort and their performance and from every promise that they can see, but it's not in detail. So my application have two levels. One is a public one and the private one. So we ensure transparent and privacy at the same time with the blockchain technology.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hank, for that. What is the next step in your research?
Yeah, so the validation have finished and I received the fund from Amazon Web Service to launch my application in the web service with the two level of the privacy and public one. So I'm looking forward to see the application on the in the official blockchain network, and then I'm looking for the early adopter company in the logistics currently now in Australia. So hopefully I will have to see really a lot of early adopter to run through my application.
That sounds exciting. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Han. Now, please welcome, last but not least, our 10th presenter, Martino Malerba from Deakin University.
I am Dr. Martino Malerba from Deakin University's Blue Carbon Lab. What you're seeing here is a farm dome, and it looks as if it was having a rainy day. Except when I took this footage, it was perfectly sunny. What you're seeing here are not raindrops, they are methane bubbles. These methane bubbles are created at the bottom of the farm dome and then released into the environment. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. It is 30 to 50 times more powerful than carbon dioxide, which means that farm dumps are contributors to climate change. There are around 1.75 million farm dumps scattered across Australia, which means that methane production from farm dumps is quite a contributor to Australia's agricultural carbon production. Except these emissions are hidden. We don't know how much it is, we don't account for it, and we don't know how to reduce the production of these bubbles. So in my research, I'm breaking the walls of these hidden emissions in Australia's agriculture. And I want to do that following a roadmap. First of all, I want to collect more data. I want to understand the process leading to methane production in farm dumps. To do so, at the university, we created tailor-made sensors specifically to monitor methane in farm dumps, and we're hoping to deploy them all across Australia. Second step in my roadmap is to talk to farmers. Farmers are part of the solution. We want to get them involved. We want to hear what they think, and we want to see their attitude toward restoring farm dumps to reduce their carbon footprint. And finally, I want to talk to the government. I want to engage with the clean energy regulator and see if there are ways that we can help farmers through financial incentives to manage their farm dumps and reduce carbon pollution. So I hope to share my trip along the way with you all. So keep up to date with the news. Cheers!
Thank you, Martino. A really significant problem, the hidden emissions from methane from farm dumps. I was astonished at 1.75 million farm dumps. Are you proposing to have sensors at every single one, or how many sensors do you need?
Well, yeah, that's a lot of sensors, right? We will need to ask a lot of effort from our friends in California producing these sensors. Maybe that's not the way to go. I think this is just the initial investment, developing sensors to understanding the principles behind these emissions. And then after that, I'm pretty sure we have excellent personnel with remote sensing and satellite technology that can give some pretty good guesses on what we're dealing with without having to measure it directly.
So it's estimating the size of the problem and educating farmers, so illustrating the problem to farmers. That sounds like a very sensible way to go. So what are the solutions? Ultimately, you engage farmers and then government through the clean energy regulator, but how do farmers actually solve the problem?
Yeah, so our latest research was published a month ago and showed that a simple management intervention, as much as like fencing a farm dump so then livestock cannot walk inside the farm dump, or like fencing a farm dump to generally promote the vegetation and protect the vegetation inside the fence, can halve methane production from a farm dump. So we're talking about, on average, a 56% reduction in these bubbles. And that's a really simple starting point, like a few $100 fence. And then we're looking for other solutions, but already a 56% reduction, it's a pretty good deal.
So explain again, how does excluding animals from the farm dump, is it the animals eating the farm dump that's producing the methane? Or I thought it was the breakdown of the organic matter and bubbling up through water.
Yeah, so by having a fence, what happens is you're avoiding the livestock to go inside the water and excreting manure. Right. As well as with the fence, you have vegetation that can create a biofilter to the farm dump to reduce nutrients and clean up the nutrients inside the farm dump. So these all act to increase water quality, so reducing nutrient loads, as well as increase dissolved oxygen in the water. And and the end product is less methane.
Good. Thank you so much. That's an excellent idea, Martina. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Martino. This now concludes the presentations and the question and answers. What a wonderful job they all did. We have such a wide array of possible improvements in our lives. Now, which are the most innovative, the most convincing ideas and walls to break down? The jury has the task to choose. They will now deliberate for 20 minutes, and we will be back soon to announce the top 2 winners who will represent New South Wales, ACT, South Australia, Victoria and Tasmania at the Falling Walls Lab in September 26th. That is the Australian finale. Now, don't forget to cast your vote for your People's Choice. You will have time until the jury returns to do so on Facebook and YouTube, where this event is being live streamed. So, we'll be back soon, but in the meantime, enjoy some interesting videos, especially selected for you.
Wireless medical robots, personalised cancer vaccines, and heart valve replacements for children. Just some of this year's standout medical innovations pitched during the Falling Walls and Berlin Science Week World Science Summit. More than 900 nominations from 111 countries. It seems the global pandemic hasn't slowed big thinking from some of our brightest minds. Across the next 4 weeks, I'm going to share my picks for the Falling Walls breakthroughs of the year from fields such as climate science, technology, social science, and first up, medical.
Effective drug delivery to disease sites remains a major challenge in today's medicine.
That's Professor Simone Schuler, who wants to improve the way drugs target specific parts of our bodies. Her secret weapon? Magnets.
We are working with a special strain of bacteria that can sense magnetic fields.
When the researchers put the bacteria into a microfluidic system and then applied rotating magnetic fields in various orientations, the bacteria followed, pulling along any nearby nanoparticles. In fact, the nanoparticles were pushed into model tissue 3 times faster than when magnets weren't used.
Another part that has been bugging me was actually how we could more selectively apply these rotational magnetic fields at a human scale. And this is something I've been working on with my team recently, and we came up with a design, but we haven't built it yet, and so that is something I'm eager to explore.
This next innovation makes use of magnets too, but was inspired by small, soft-bodied animals.
Our dream has been creating tiny medical machines that can operate inside our body all the time for medical diagnostics and treatment.
Professor Martin City says his little robot can do just about anything.
We design and build a new soft robot that is in this mini-size scale that has a very special programmed micromagnet inside, and then we can have all different locomotion modalities like walking, rolling, jumping, swimming, and going on the water surface type of behavior for the first time on the same robot.
And with such flexibility, it could be programmed for things as complex as drug delivery, fluid pumping, and even liquid biopsies. The robots aren't ready yet. The researchers are tackling all types of challenges, especially from our immune system. But the results are promising, so watch this space. Next up, I want you to meet Associate Professor Michelle Manger, who's changing our understanding of brain tumours.
The essential finding of my research is that brain cancers like glioblastoma and diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma interact with normal brain cells called neurons, and that these interactions are fundamental to the progression and growth of these cancers.
In fact, cancer cells integrate into neural circuits. That leads to electrical currents flowing through the cancers.
And what we find is this electrical signaling is really central to the tumor's ability to grow and invade.
Knowing that has opened up entirely new directions in developing therapeutic strategies. Let's head to Helsinki now and the medical startup dressing up viruses to fool cancer.
One of the biggest challenges in cancer therapy is the fact that tumor originates from our own tissue. So for our immune system, that is actually the police that guards our body, it's very difficult to spot tumor.
But immune systems do recognise viruses. They activate T cells to respond to foreign substances in the body.
A few years ago, we had an idea. Why don't we take the tumor, we chop the tumor in small pieces, and then we load these small pieces on the surface of a virus.
So the viruses are modified to carry tumour cell fragments that the immune system can recognise, acting almost like a vaccine. Keep an eye on virus therapy for cancers. Many consider it the new frontier. Finally, to a breakthrough providing new hope to babies born with heart valve defects.
The essential new finding of our research is that we have established a method to produce a heart valve from living tissue from the patient, him or herself. That means there's no rejection, there's no other tissue needed, there are no other materials needed.
In Europe alone, around 1,200 heart valve transplants are performed on children each year. The mechanical heart valves normally used require lifelong blood thinning treatments and are susceptible to infections.
So we want to bring the solution of a baby, of a child heart valve to the market. We will produce a growing heart valve, which is implanted once and stays in for a lifetime, so that there's no resurgery needed.
Brilliant, right? So they're just some of my favourite medical innovations of the year. You can learn more about them and many other amazing breakthroughs by registering for the World Science Summit, bringing together Falling Walls Remote 2020 and the Berlin Science Week. You'll find the link in the social post. And make sure you stay across Global Science TV in coming weeks for innovations in tech, climate and social sciences. Trust me, they're worth seeing. I'm Nuala Hafner. Chat soon.
Australia has said it aims to cut its carbon emissions to net zero by 2050.
And it joins other countries around the world in promising to make the nation carbon neutral by then.
The real issue is how, and our answer is technology.
Technology will have the answers to a decarbonised economy.
But what kind of technology?
I don't think there is one silver bullet.
Professor Thomas Maschmeyer was awarded the Prime Minister's Prize for Science in 2020 for his work on renewable energy and plastic waste recycling. He says while there's been plenty of talk about things such as carbon capture, the biggest game changer has been the rapidly falling price of solar energy.
What other thing has decreased in price by 95% over a period of 10 years? That is enabling as input a whole lot of other technologies.
That includes energy storage, such as his own battery creation, G-Lion, which thanks to its zinc bromide composition can work in tough environments, such as agricultural or remote communities. But G-Lion can also support the deployment of another emerging technology, green hydrogen.
Our battery is our natural partner for solar battery electrolyzer to generate the green hydrogen.
Most of the buzz around green hydrogen has centred on electric cars and trucks, but it can also be used to replace coal in steel refineries. Swapping out coal to make steel is something Professor Veena Sahajwala is already doing at UNSW.
Our green steel technology is all about showing that we can actually use materials like waste tires in the process of making steel.
Her polymer injection technology, which extracts hydrogen and solid carbon from old tyres, has been used in the production of more than 30 million tonnes of steel around the world. Professor Sahajwala is now even experimenting with using waste coffee as a source of carbon.
Traditionally, of course, the world always thinks that you need coal and coke to produce these metals. And what we are doing is completely shifting the mindset and saying that the production of green materials is absolutely possible in a way that it not only enables us to recycle our materials, but also enables us to bring green manufacturing to life anywhere in the world using Australian science.
But Professor Maschmeyer cautions that science takes time.
You have the idea, you've got to patent the idea in some form, you've got to build the team, You've got to validate and verify whatever your mousetrap is.
It also takes money, and Australia currently spends less on research and development as a proportion of GDP than the OECD average.
There need to be an investment and a political framework. The settings of that framework will help to accelerate or decelerate progress.
The Australian Academy of Science, because questions need answers.
Pandemics have increased in frequency in the last few hundred years, and it's an obvious reflection of the way humans live. We have bigger populations, we're more connected, we're more urban, we're denser, we interact more with wildlife species, we have deforestation. So it's going to happen more, and I think climate change is really going to be a key driver of this, because as climates change, what will happen is that animals will change their distribution too, because they're affected by climate change, and they're probably grouped together more, allowing viruses to jump more between them. Humans who rely on animal species will need to change their way of living, their livelihoods, their way of acquiring food, and they'll probably be exposed to new animal species and new pathogens too. So I think climate change and pandemics go hand in hand. Climate change will get more pandemics. If you look at people who live near wildlife, who work in animal markets or live near bat caves, they are very commonly exposed to viruses. It happens all the time. Even people in North America are very commonly exposed, for example, to swine flu viruses. Okay, so they're continually, people handle pigs, work in pig farms, go to pig fairs, their pig viruses come to humans. So this exposure is happening all the time. Okay. Normally, luckily, they don't go anywhere. So there's one case and it burns itself out. Every so often though, and increasingly often now in this modern world, you get a chance for the virus to get going, cause an epidemic or even a pandemic.
The Australian Academy of Science, because questions need answers.
This big, cool competition that looks at research from young scientists all over the world who have the next big thing. I've created a piece of technology that can empower people to retrain their balance in their own homes before they have those falls. This is particularly for people who live in regional and remote areas and might not have access to the medical facilities that we have in big cities.
I work on designing and fabricating implants that we can load with multiple different chemotherapy drugs to actually insert inside the tumour. I'm looking forward to the networking opportunities.
The Australian Academy of Science. Follow our Facebook page.
Astronomers think they may have found 4 exoplanets, or planets orbiting other suns beyond our solar system, using nothing more than low-frequency radio waves. The signals from as far as 89 light-years away were picked up by the world's largest ground-based radio telescope, the Low Frequency Array, and may shed light on the habitat of the exoplanets. Scientist Dr. Benjamin Pope says the team discovered signals from 19 distant red dwarf stars, 4 of which are best explained by the existence of planets orbiting them. Radio signals from those 4 stars seem to be emitted by their own spectacular light show, also called an aurora. Earth's aurorae form when particles from the Sun collide with our planet's atmosphere, and on Jupiter they also form from the planet's magnetic interaction with its moon, Io. The aurorae detected by the researchers indicate the presence of a hidden exoplanet, magnetically connected to its star just as Io is to Jupiter. This means that they aren't shielded from any of their star's radioactive flares, making conditions on the surface too harsh for life. Co-author Dr. Joseph Callingham points out that Jupiter's volcanic moon blasts material out in space, filling Jupiter's environment with particles that drive unusually powerful aurorae. Our model for this radio emission from our stars is a scaled-up version of that. Once the more powerful square kilometre array is functional in outback Australia, the technique could track aurorae even further away.
The Australian Academy of Science, because questions need answers. Academy of Science, because questions need answers.
Science matters to all of us.
We're living in science. We're a world that's driven by science.
A world without science would be a desolate sort of place.
No technology, no electricity, no travel, no planes, no medicine.
A good scientist is someone who can ask a really good question. Once you've answered it, it will have an impact on all sorts of other fields.
With science, you're trying to uncover something no one else has ever managed to discover.
I think the moment of discovery is a really interesting moment. The point where you realise that you're studying something that could be profoundly interesting and you can almost taste the discovery.
It's the biggest buzz you can imagine, the aha moment. That, oh my God, we've got it.
We live in a world of extraordinary challenges. The solutions to those challenges are more science and technology, not less.
If the public have a deeper understanding of science, that allows them to make more informed choices about the way they live their lives, the way they interact with the planet, and being healthier, which ultimately impacts their families and their communities.
The future doesn't happen to us. We get to decide. Those decisions will be about how we best use technology and science to solve the very many problems that are facing us.
We have come a really long way in scientific discovery and innovation over the last 100 years, even in the last decade. But there is still so much that we don't know.
The beauty of the universe.
Understanding the basic building blocks of life.
The beauty of how things work.
With science, you can solve problems. With science, you can make discoveries that none of us could ever have imagined.
Every day, young sunflowers take part in a remarkable dance known as heliotropism. They trace the sun's movement across the sky, turning their faces from east to west. Then at night time, they twist their heads back towards the east in preparation for sunrise.
That part in particular, we know is controlled by something called a circadian clock. This internal biological timekeeper that we have in our bodies, but it also exists in many different organisms, including plants, and that allows the plants to essentially know what time of day it is and predict important events like sunrise.
This daily ritual is vital to plant survival. One study found that east-facing sunflowers attract about 5 times as many pollinators as west-facing ones during the early morning. That's partly because warmer sunflowers are better at producing and releasing pollen, while their increased exposure to sunlight also makes their colors or UV patterns more visible to insects like bees. Many flowers, including daisies and buttercups, are heliotropic. It's a trait that also increases photosynthesis in leaves, the process of how plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to create oxygen and nutrients.
The thing that drives plant growth is photosynthesis, and that requires light. So by having the leaves move so that they capture as much sunlight as possible, that's going to increase their growth.
But this dance doesn't last forever, at least not for sunflowers. Once these flowers have matured, they will settle on facing east to continue attracting pollinators.
The Australian Academy of Science, because questions need answers.
Welcome back to our audience, to the presenters and the jury. Now, before we get to announce the winners, let us quickly recap our 10 presenters. So please let me remind you of the great ideas we have seen today. Breaking the wall of ageless electronics, Hareem from CSIRO. Breaking the wall of medical device bioactivity, Lotz from the University of Sydney. Breaking the wall of drug-resistant malaria, Merryn Fraser from the Australian National University. Breaking the wall of self-compassion, Madeline Ferrari from the Australian Catholic University. Breaking the wall of deep geothermal energy recoveries, Fiona, Harshini, Desmond, Godfrey from Monash University. Breaking the wall of conceptual shift and prevention of T to D, Shamoon from the Australian National University. Breaking the wall of space debris prevention, Mars Butfield Edison from the University of Tasmania. Breaking the wall of mobility as a service design, Hernando Lozano Paredes from the University of Technology in Sydney. Breaking the wall of false promises in supply chain, Hung Bui from the University of New South Wales. And last but not least, breaking the wall of hidden carbon emissions in agriculture, Martino Malerba from Deakin University. Now, after the deliberations, please welcome jury chair and New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, and the Commissioner of Natural Resource Commission, New South Wales Government, Professor Hugh Durant-White.
Thank you very much, Hans. The jury were very, very impressed, particularly with the quality of the presentations, but also the material. Really, really interesting ideas in many of these areas. And no matter what happens this evening, I think you've all got good ideas that you should carry on and pursue in lots of different ways. So I'd like basically now to announce the winners. And I'm going to do it in sort of from third, second, and first in that order. So in third place, just let me get my data in the right place. Just 5 seconds here, guys. In third place, we have breaking the wall of medical device bioactivity, Lotz from the University of Sydney. It says in my run sheet whether Oliver wants to say something, if he's there.
Hi, yeah, nothing in particular. I'm just honoured to have this project recognised, and thank you.
Yep, okay, thank you. In second place, again, just trying to find my sheet here at the same time. Breaking the wall of drug-resistant malaria, Merryn Fraser from the Australian National University. Again, Merryn, if you'd like to say something, you're welcome to.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's exciting to be able to share my research.
Great, wonderful. And in first place, really, really pleased to announce this, and I will say it was top of most people's lists on the jury as well, is breaking the wall of space debris prevention, Mars Butterfield Addison from the University of Tasmania. Great, congratulations, Mars. Would you like to say anything as well?
Thank you very much. I have to shout out all the fantastic people at the King Island Council building in Tasmania, where I got stuck today, who have let me sit in their lobby to do this, without which I would not have been able to join. So this is very, very amazing, and thank you to them.
Okay, that's great. Congratulations again. Cheers. Actually goes to breaking the wall of deep geothermal energy recoveries, Fiona, which is Fiona, Harshini, Roy, Desmond, Godfrey from Monash University. So congratulations, Fiona. Great piece of work. Really interesting where it goes. I have my own interest in geothermal energy.
Thank you, Hug. I think since Hans is not there, on behalf of DAD Australia, Euraxis Australia and New Zealand, and Federal Foreign Office of Germany, as well as the Australian Academy of Science, I'd like to sincerely thank everyone involved in the event. To begin with, I'd like to thank our jury members, Professor Hug Durant-White, Professor Martina Stenzel, Professor Stephen Simpson, Ms. Rosie Keane, Dr. Michael Jettinig, Professor Catherine Below, and my colleague, Ms. Katrina McGrath. A big thank you to our support team as well, Silke, Michael, Lucas, and Oliver, for doing an amazing job of helping us bring this event to our wider audience who are watching us from different parts of the country. And last but not the least, a big thank to you, Hans, for being an amazing MC and running the event in the smoothest possible way. I think I'll pass it on to you to make the closing.
Thank you, Nishant. Please let me also thank the event organizers, both locally and globally, who made Falling Walls Lab possible. Now, we would like to encourage everyone to take part in the Falling Walls Australia finale, which will take place on Monday, the 26th of September, online from the Shine Dome of the Australian Academy of Science in Canberra. There we'll have 5 winners from this Falling Walls Lab, plus 5 winners from Falling Walls Brisbane. We will have a new jury, and we will select the 3 people who will go on to present Australia in Berlin. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. We will share the details with all who have registered for today's event and on our social media channels. So I hope you tune in September to find out who will be traveling to Berlin. This now concludes the Falling Walls Lab Sydney 2022. I'm Professor Hans Bachor. Good evening.